Policy and Priorities Committee meeting to order. First item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda itself. Go ahead.
Recommend the council adopt the agenda for Monday, May 14th, 2018, Policies and Priorities Committee meeting as presented.
Thank you very much. Seconder, Councillor Scott. Discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. Next item on the agenda, the adoption of the minutes. Recommendation. Councillor Scott.
The council adopts the minutes of April 9th, 2018, Policies and Priorities Committee meeting as presented.
Thank you very much. Seconded by Councillor Mackay. Discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. Any business arising from the minutes, council? Hearing none, we'll move down to petitions and delegations. And first item on the agenda under that heading is Canadian Mounted Police and Sergeant James Vale. And welcome, sir. Nice to have you here.
Yes.
The floor is yours.
Okay, so what I'm going to do is I don't have any presentation for you, just see the letter that I submitted here and any questions that you may have. So I'll speak first, I'll kind of go through in order here. Detachment caseload for last year, we were up slightly from the year before, so we had 847 calls for service from April 2017 to March 2018. The same period the year prior, we had 820, and the year prior to that, we had 847. So it's pretty flat, our calls for service, around the mid 800s. For resourcing, right now we are fully staffed with myself and 4 constables at the detachment, but we have 2 constables due out, Constable Wilhelm Skeepers and Constable Tyler Rodney are both departing. Constable Skeepers is finished his term in Tumbler Ridge. His replacement has been selected and is a member coming from Dease Lake that I've heard nothing but good things about, comes with a young family. The other Constable Tyler Rodney, unfortunately he has to leave us. His family has some medical concerns, so he's being relocated so he can address those concerns for his family. His replacement has been selected and is coming from Mission, BC, and apparently again is a member that's very highly regarded and comes with a young family as well. So it looks like both members that we're getting are very good, community orientated and motivated. We still have Val, 1 public service employee, we have victim service work here, and we have 1 part-time guard. Victim services, I don't have the numbers for victim services, but I know she's been helping quite a few people, especially with domestic violence, which we've had a slight rise in with all the people coming from outside the community, and I'll touch base on that a little bit. Community policing, in November 2016, upon my arrival, we implemented our crime prevention prolific offender management program, which involves curfew checks, people that choose to not obey the law and continually break it. We seek curfew conditions and things that we can monitor actively, and we don't have to reactively wait for them to commit a crime. We can instead monitor them. We've had great success. When I first got here, there's 4 individuals on curfew. Up until a few weeks ago, we had none because all the people chose to leave town or complied and got through their terms on conditions. Currently, we have 1 individual who moved to town from another community, Fort St. John, and is on conditions for another few months. And we have another person who we just arrested actually the other day for domestic violence who will be on conditions going forward. So we've got 2 people we're currently monitoring. For our programs for last year, for our results under the annual performance plan, we targeted crime reduction with violent and other persons offenses, so things that involve violence, not property. In 2016-17, we had 7 charges of domestic violence in Tumbler Ridge. During the same period last year, we had 12. I did a review due to the rise. I did a review of all the files that we dealt with, and of those, 5 of the 12 charges were on people that were from outside of the community who were not living here. They were here for the weekend for a holiday or a Grizz Fest or something like that. So it was only 7 of the 12 again were actually Tumbler Ridge residents. The rest were all people that were staying at the hotel or visiting friends for the crime reduction. During 2016-2017, we had 7 reports of break and enter in Tumbler Ridge, and during the same period last year, we had 5. So there's been a 29% reduction in reports of break and enter. Again, this is something that it's difficult to target because we have so few, and there's kind of like no pattern to it. It would be like nothing for months and months and months, and then one person will have their shed broken into, and then nothing for months and months and months, and then a yard will be broken into. So it's a challenge in that regard. If there's some sort of consistency or some sort of method to it, we can kind of target that itself. But when it's once every 3 or 4 months you have one incident, it's very difficult to target that. Traffic has been a big push, and our numbers for this year are going to be up quite a bit from even last year. But during 2016-2017, we conducted 19 road checks, 128 traffic contacts, and 8 impaired drivers were intercepted. During the same period of 2017-2018, we did 16 road checks, so down on road checks. Again, quite a bit of that was we've had some staffing concerns as of late, so members have been working by themselves. Difficult to do road checks when you're working by yourself, so instead people do roving traffic. 155 traffic contacts, which is up, and 12 impaired drivers were intercepted. This year already, this weekend, we intercepted 3 impaired drivers. We have quite a few more. I think we're already at 6 since beginning of April. So our stats for this next year are going to be quite up quite a bit from there. And again, I'd attribute that quite a bit to the members that we've received. They're very motivated and want to intercept these people. So the people coming in as well seem to be similarly motivated. So I'm hoping that trend continues and improves. Community engagement. We're very active with community events. We're going to be speaking with the preschool kids this week, both at the preschool and the library. We're doing a bike rodeo. We're participating in DARE. We've got 2 DARE classes currently running. Constable Draws is currently doing soccer as well. Constable Robert Shaw is helping with that as well. So we're involved in quite a few things in the community, and I don't have all the things we've done to date right now, but I will have that at a later date if people are interested in that. But we do have 2 DARE classes running right now that are anticipated to be graduating in the next month or so, and then next year we're planning on putting on at least 2 more DARE classes. And for the priorities, I'll speak on the priorities for 2017-2018. The priorities for 2017-2018, I'm looking at continuing to focus on traffic. So that's impaired drivers, speeders, people driving prohibited without licenses. Crime reduction, so anything that's crime reduction orientated. So if we have prolific offenders, putting them on monitoring, domestic violence, education for the people involved, and conditions that make it more difficult for people to reoffend. Community engagement, so the DARE program, helping with anything that goes on in the community, and respectful workplace. And if there's any further priorities that I think would be appropriate, I'm receptive to that as well. So that concludes my report for the last year. If anybody has any questions.
Thank you very much. Council? Councilor Scott?
I was just wondering, with the replacements, is there going to be a gap in, or will the transitions?
I'm trying to minimize the impact as much as possible. So my intention is I would like to have 1 out, and then there's always going to be about a 1 or 2 week gap. But I'm trying to reduce that down to as little as possible. I want to have it basically door to door. So we lose one guy, a week later when his house is ready, a new guy moves in.
Perfect.
So I'm trying to minimize the impact for the community and for our safety. It's not pleasant running with 3 people in 24-hour coverage.
Yes. And Constable Gross.
Yes.
How long is he in Tumblr? That their program is something that I think is really good, engaging with the young people in the schools and that.
He's been here for about 1 year now.
Okay.
So he's got another 3 years
Okay.
till his 4-year commitment, because Tumble Ridge is a 4-year commitment for RCP
Right.
members. And at that time, if he chooses to extend or not, I can't speak to that, but he's got at least 3 more years.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Thank you, Rosa. So again, I just want to thank you guys again for everything you guys do. I think I do it every year, but I know some of the challenges you guys face and stuff. So hats off to your group that goes over and above what other communities are doing for members. So thanks to your staff for that. Drugs and narcotics. We had any arrests or anything of that nature with?
We've had a few individuals that we've targeted, and we've worked to the point of applying for warrants that were unsuccessful, and other ones that we've pretty much had were a week or two away from warrants being most likely granted. But unfortunately, when we reach that point, because it's a small town, people get heated up and again move out of town. The last 2 that we've targeted have left town prior to us, because it's obtaining a warrant is a lengthy process.
Yeah.
And we've had individuals leave town when we're at the last third of that process, so it kind of derails the process. But at the end of the day, it addresses the current concern here, but not
Yeah.
globally. But yes, it's Constable Robert Shaw has quite an extensive background in drugs and prolific offenders, and he has a great interest in that. So I know we're actively seeing what we can get, because we don't want them here either.
Perfect. Thank you.
Anything further, Council? One question I have, so you can feel it for me. Years back, we used to have a citizens on patrol, contingent and so forth, in Tumblr Ridge and so forth. Do you see a need for that? Would that be a helpful addition kind of thing, if that could be arranged and so on? Could you give us your views on that?
It's something that I'd never want to close the door to, and I've had several conversations about that. To date, it hasn't kind of reactivated, and there hasn't been. My honest opinion is I don't think there's a great need for it at the moment. There's not any major issues here that I think an extra set of eyes would necessarily help for, but that doesn't mean there's no value to it. But we haven't had a trend, because typically it's used for things like if there's break-in enters, they watch for break-in enters, or they can relay information if there's something we're watching for. But there's been nothing that I can say that's been a great note recently. But again, I'm more than happy to have any assistance that people want to give, and especially if they're volunteering their time. So it's definitely something I'm not closed to do, but I know all conversations to date have kind of reached a point, and it's kind of hasn't continued, and then it's kind of restarted. It's so I don't know how great the interest is locally. So.
Well, if there's anything that we can do in that regard, it'd be helpful to having that once you feel the need for it. We hope that you come back and let us know and see what we can do to help that out.
Yes, for sure. And I know it's something that we've looked at extending, and we've done the insurance to make sure that it's kind of a turnkey when there's the interest and the motivation and need. It's kind of a turnkey. You can start up again rather than having to start from zero. So I know it's kind of on the back burner right now, but it's not dead.
Fair enough. Thank you very much. Anything further, Councillor? Well, thank you very much for your update. We look forward to seeing you again.
Oh, for sure.
Thank you. Mr. McKellar, welcome. Nice to see you again. Discussion on community forest.
Yes, I'm here to chat a bit about our last stage of wildfire protection planning around the town. I did submit something in September, but I back again just to perhaps update you and get more of a fuller picture. Maybe open it, because that was in a council meeting. Maybe there's more openness to discussions or topics or more things you'd like to chat about as well. I'll just quickly do a bit of history on some of the documentation that we're working from. Of course, our chief is well aware of that. Hopefully folks are seeing this book. It's been around a while. My focus is interestingly more on the community zone around the community, which is about a 10-kilometer radius roughly. And a lot of the community forest area is to the north, especially of town, is in community forest. To the south is Canfor's area too. But it does say here, how do you get fire smart from a landscape perspective? And first of all, the first point is to talk to the right people to participate, stakeholders, municipalities, wildland managers, and local fire people. And then we do threat assessments. And the community's done 2 threat assessments, documentations. You had one commissioned in about 8 years ago. And then it was redone again in 2014. And roughly these things have gone through they were presented to council when they were done. And the threat assessments basically, they have people wander through 2 kilometers circumference around town, looking at the forest and seeing how fire risk it is. You know, if it's an open field, of course, it won't have much fire risk as a bunch of dead trees laying on the ground or something. So that has been done as well. And so we and also before I arrived, before the community forest was here, the town was working on wildfire management through funding through UCM, I think, and doing little pieces here and there, and we have those all mapped if you ever want to look at the history of what was done. But my focus today is primarily, I guess, on my letter that I sent you, or my notes here. I'm probably going to start on page 2 as a start. This sort of colorful map, just having the documentation, just basically shows the fire risk around town that still exists. And we, you know, which, like I said, we go around 2 kilometers around town. We addressed the area. It was in the pond block by the high school about 4 years ago. Did a treatment by the golf course. We did a treatment, and these are the larger treatments of recent time. And the larger treatment was up by the horse stables. The last sort of block of area that's of decent size is southeast of town. And there's a picture of it, sort of. It says green by 4 block. CP4 block boarding is this state here. Also shows it on the next page in sort of an image as well, of where the potential treatment area would be. I had some pictures up from aerial photography that I'd like to just go through. There's about a dozen of them, and these are just pictures from a helicopter that's maybe a couple of years old now, maybe 2 years old. And this, I don't guess we have a pointer, right? But
Just use
Oh, the mounting
the
mouse.
mouse and
Yeah.
then
Right. So this is a highway. This is the card walk here, and from the maps that are on your paper, that there's a treatment plant in this sort of forest, and along the edge, you can sort of see it here, and then the larger treatment area is over here. Also, I want to bring to your attention on the map. There's a section of this area that's at the first picture here that is in town land. And that's why, in addition to this, if you agree to do some treatments here, you have to engage the community forest to work on your behalf, because they're working inside your town land, they're not working in the crown forest. So the green line here, to this side of it is actually town-owned land, just like the pond block is town-owned land. I'm going to go to the next picture.
arrow down,
But
right here. This one.
oh, okay. That's doesn't show too well in that picture, but you can start to see some of the gray trees in there. And again, the prescription plan is to do very similar treatment to select harvesting. It's not going to be, as we saw in the past, right behind the commercial area where they took out all the pine trees, I guess, and left all the spruce, and we knew what happened there. All blew them. That's just looking a little far at the this way down the highway a bit, there's the gravel pit. And you can start, if you can differentiate, if no one's colorblind, you can differentiate the gray and the green area there. To the south of the highway is a TFL. So do a treatment in there, but it's not our. Another picture of it again, just looking a bit farther, you can see the town and you can see the gray trees in there. So the concept is to try to go around all this stuff and try to pick out, and not clear cut in here, but to pick out the dead trees, so they don't make any sense to leave the dead ones there, and a follower selection to take out various other species here, but leaving enough forest so it doesn't look like it's been harvested too heavily. Another sort of image of the same thing looking down the highway. So if you can, I don't know if you can do that, but if you can sort of suggest what we're looking at taking, it's not that entire strip that's going to be bald by any stretch of the imagination. Now this is sort of the humpy part, the bigger piece, and that's probably a better picture. But again, this is a couple of years old. The dead and dying trees in there, and that wall of fiber or fuel that's sitting there. Now you can argue that the prevailing winds don't come from this area as much, and that's one reason we left it till last. We did the west side first and the north. You know, the fire was from the north. But again, and fire doesn't run downhill as much. That's why if you go to town here, there's dead trees on that steep side hill. Part of it's in our forest, part of it's in the woodlot. But this area has potential if the conditions right to really gain steam up here. Even though there are a bit of fire breaks that have been designed or built, you can't see it too well, but there has been some thinning happening closer to the town here. Again, just another image of the stand there. And another one with the mortality suggests here when they count the trees, 40 to 50% of the trees are dead, of the conifer trees. Threw a couple of slides in of what the horse block looks like from the air. If we get a chance to go in the helicopter to look at it. A couple of pictures. I was just there again today. We're going to be planting this in 2 weeks, wide space planting. So there'll be a younger forest that comes up, but it won't be very thick. The idea is to have it quite wide, and double the width you normally space at. So normally we space them 8 feet apart. They might be more like 16 feet apart. Concept being that they don't carry a fire if they do catch fire when they're young. And there's another picture of it. So that's what I'm looking to try to do over in this piece just down in the southeast corner of your community. I don't know if you had a chance, but just this week the province came out with a flood and fire review report. They talk a lot about what to do, and a lot of it is to try to prevent fires in these communities, anywhere from Kelowna to small communities. And they really see community forests or community tenures taking a lead role in this. And often there aren't community forests around towns, and they don't have that luxury, if you will, because we have a lot more flexibility in what we can do, and we can spend more time and do things that maybe are not all cost effective from a fiber perspective, getting all the money up, but it addresses other issues like tourism and visuals and so on. So in the review that just came out a week ago, the NDP government is pushing hard to change the legislation. This is still in discussion phase, I guess. But they want to change the legislation around the communities to allow community forests to control 10 kilometers around every community that wants a community forest. You don't have to have one. And the rationale is, again, because we can do stuff like that. You won't see a Canfor or a local person doing. Not to beat up on the big companies, but so they sort of see that the flexibility really resides with community tenures, and because you folks have a big say in what happens here. Just want to bring that to your attention. I guess I'll just open it up to questions if you have questions or.
All right, sir. Thank you very much. Council, questions, comments? Councilor Hal, go ahead.
What type of revenue you expect to make out of this?
I might ask that before. I think I'd have to go over my numbers again, but 8,000, somewhere in there. Depending on what sort of treatments are requested after, like in your private lands, if you want to have it chipped like it was done along the road here, and less debris and visually, then that's going to take some money away from the revenue. That's a fairly expensive treatment.
But there's enough lumber there that it's not gonna cost us.
No, you're going to make a profit.
Okay.
The town's going to make, or the community force make a profit.
Councillor Scott, go ahead.
On the fire breaks, is it mandatory to replant, or is that your practice to?
It's a good question. Legally, and under any crown land, you're obligated to reforest, even up to as small as a hectare. So we have, you can, however, change the prescription to say it's reforested as you see on the screen here, depending on how what your prescription is written. The ones we've done there was only 2 that are in Cooney Forest presently, the golf block and the horse block, and we've written them in such a way that we're flexible on what we can do here. So it's a bit of a game, and the government doesn't give us much direction. They say kind of do what you want as long as you want to put your professional stamp on it. But we could leave it like that, like it is there, but I see holes in it. I don't think it looks very nice as it could. I think planting through that and providing some little trees, it'll make it look nice, not tomorrow, but say 5 years out. In addition, if you drive through there or walk through there, it also gives us the opportunity where there are openings right by the roads, those will fill up into trees, well-spaced trees, hopefully. But yes, you do have to reforest it to a level you suggested to.
Okay. Well, and it only makes sense to take the dry timber out.
The reason that law was put into place was to keep all of our crown forest growing a fiber crop for the future generations. They didn't, and future revenues. Crown wants its revenue, but in some places, revenue isn't the prime objective of a place near a community to live. So that's why they're giving us a little more flexibility. Right now, it says I have to plant a minimum of 800 well-spaced growing trees in this area, and I almost have that already. I'll pop a few more in there, and like I say, aesthetically it'll look better going forward.
Councillor,
Yes, that's good, thank you.
Councillor Kirkwood?
Thank you, sir. So just on the, say it won't cost adjusted to anything, but I've read you through your contract. There's actually a 95 per hour plus GST, plus we pay accommodations if needed and food if needed. Is that just for you, or is that for all manpower there?
No, that's just me.
And truck mileage?
Yeah, that's just for my, because you're working in town land, I guess. It just hasn't, there has to be some sort of agreement there when so the community forest can work on your land. There has to be a contract, I think, to keep it clean. You can't just willy-nilly have somebody doing work in your land without some agreement. So, yeah, I guess there is a bit of, it's offset by the revenue we will make.
So it's offset from the revenue the district will get back from their trees? Or from the community
The
forest?
community forest will get the revenue from the trees, yeah.
So-
So they give to the district for free. Unless you want to make that contract and you get that much back. I mean, you can make a
Well, that's
complicated if you want, but it's all one owner.
Anything further? Councillor Mackay?
Yeah, we had discussed one of the options of being what Councillor Scott was talking about there in maybe not replanting, and maybe just letting alders and whatever just take over, use that as a bit of a fire break. But so that I think that's still kind of a discussion over it. But down by the horse stables, I did catch the amount or how wide the planting is going to be.
16 feet.
18 feet.
16 feet roughly, between trees.
Okay.
So from me to you in ways, approximately.
Are we kind of is that kind of an open, can we make that if we want to go 20 or want to go 30, is that up to us?
Yeah, I mean,
We're not
there's,
mandated to put in
that's
so
right.
many?
There has to be a minimum of, I think it's 700 or 800, I think it's 700 stems per hectare well growing of conifer trees 15 years from now.
Yeah.
But you can alter that if you want because it's a wildfire prescribed area. But for other reasons, like I said, aesthetics, et cetera, it's probably good to put a few trees in there. It's not, it'll fall over, So, I think it'll look good with a few trees in there. Now, the private land on this area, we didn't plant any of the pond block at all because the council at the time never requested that. still could, have that planted if you wanted to. And same with this area here. You don't have to have that planted by legislation. The other part, to the east, you must do something. And those the timber will be kept separate too, as far as who owns the timber. There's two different ones. And that's part of the reason why we contract for that part.
Right.
We did that the last few times too, when we did anything with town land, or we did the golf block. A bit of land was harvested by the cemetery. We just had a contract written up, it's just to sort of see why you couldn't find. We also harvested behind Doug's office back there. Again, that was town land. So that's what the contract here is, just to make sure that someone's working on your land that's got a contract, it's got WCB and it's covered off with it.
Councilor McCann?
Yep, that's good. Yeah.
Anything further, Council? Well, thank you very, very much. Always nice to see you.
Just wanted-
Updated information.
I just wanted to put that out there. Tomorrow we're flying in a helicopter, mostly the expansion areas. And there's one seat vacant. We will be in the helicopter for up to 2 hours. But if you're interested in sitting on one side, you will be put to work a bit to tell us what you see, because we're asking you to look for dead trees and stuff. But we're leaving at 8, come see me after. If you want to sit in the back seat behind me. All right?
Thank you very much. Okay, Council, we're now down to 6.1. There is a motion on the, or a motion, a recommendation and so forth. What is your pleasure? Recommendation is information or discussion. Okay.
Your Worship, I'd like to move that to discussion.
For discussion, do I have a second? Those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. That's it.
They're just looking for a letter of support for the application in regards to a grant they're going after. They're just over 29,000 for some renovations they're looking at doing in the basement. So just looking for some support from council.
Okay, there is, just further to that, there's a motion that's indicated within that, on page 19. Is that the motion? If so, put that on the floor.
Yep, I'll move that motion that's proposed there.
Do we have a second? Councilor Scott, discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. Okay, we're now down to discussion items. Section 8, and the 8.1 is the UBCM ministers' meetings. And basically, what we're looking for here is your feelings on which ministries that we should be contacting when we're going down, and also what the topics might be. So, leave that open for general discussion. Anybody who would like to provide some input into that. What are your thoughts, Councilor? Okay. Councilor Scott, go ahead.
Can we continue to, regarding that pavement, that unpaved section on Highway 52, I think we should continue bringing that forward until it is on that 10-year plan. And now with new government, who knows, maybe they'll put a positive feedback into that.
Councilor Howland, Councilor Kokoka?
I'm not sure who the correct person in the government to contact is, but just to look a little bit further into what the mitigation for caribou plan is. I think that we need to definitely put our mark on it to say that we don't necessarily want the experiment to happen in Tumbler Ridge, that they're going to shut down the caribou area here first. The way I understand it, Canoe Coal has plans to move into the East Bull Moose pit, and that's one of the areas that's a lot of contention around it. That's the #1 employer in Tumbler Ridge. I mean, to have that discussion, perhaps with Canoe Coal first, and to get us all on board, also the recreation side of it for the caribou. I don't know who that person is in the ministries, to talk to, but I would suggest that would be a hot topic here for us for the next few years going forward.
Sir, have that down. Anything further comes to mind, Council? Councilor Cook?
Probably a health minister again, since that's supposed to be our number one priority this year, so be nice to see where we're at there.
Any thoughts relative to specific topics at this time? We'll have opportunity to just talk about it in more detail, but anything just first comes to mind about it?
You know, I think more will come once we have our first meeting too, the committee meeting, but again, it's gonna be doctors, nurses,
Well, again, it's pretty
Yeah.
much,
yeah, counselors, all that. Again, we're lacking counselors again too.
anything further, Council? Councilor Kai?
I wouldn't mind another kick of the can for, to do something with the museum. I mean, we have a new government in place that might be more receptive, and, I don't know, just looking away from what's happening right now, and I think we still have to go after that.
Mark it down. Anything further? One of the things that we can do as well is continually add to topics and so forth, and then I don't see any problem with that over a period of time, scheduling either for the meeting to discuss them in detail, or do a couple at a time, 2 or 3, we would have that.
I believe that council should really take a look at finalizing, not this meeting, but at the next meeting, finalizing where you want to go. The minister meeting requests will be out sometime at the end of summer, so we want to get in there as quickly as possible in order to get those meetings. So I'd say at the next PNP,
Yeah,
council
no.
should be ready to finalize.
Yeah, and what I was referring to as well is the fact that we've identified the topics,
Mhm.
and council is satisfied with that. Then we do that, as you've mentioned, contact the various ministries as quickly as we can. It would also be a matter, I would think, of scheduling them out so that we have an opportunity, either policies and procedures, whatever, to discuss them in greater detail, to make sure we're all going down to knowing what we want to ask for, or whatever. So, as well, fair enough. Anything further, council, on that? Alrighty, we'll move on to recreational 8.2, recreational cannabis. Up for discussion, Councillor Hall.
So, my memory serves me right, when we first started, we talked about this the last time. Staff had brought forward a suggestion that we have an area of town that we say is not, through our bylaw, we don't have the consumption of marijuana in the downtown core. So again, my concern to that at that point was that how we deal with where that person was standing. Were they in the downtown core, or were they on a road to the downtown core, or deciding where that counterpoint is. To me, an easier way to deal with it is to look at the consumption of marijuana similar to the consumption of alcohol. It's very, for lack of a better term, cut and dry for alcohol use. And I don't understand why we couldn't just kind of stick with that framework going forward. And if it doesn't work, and if we find that it's too restrictive or not restrictive enough, then we could change it. But for somewhere to get started, for staff to address the bylaws, to get going on it, so we're ready when this thing gets legalized in the end of August or whatever, that to me is the right way to go. That's my take on it, that we follow the same way alcohol is, if we have any say at that point.
Roger, any further comments, council? Councillor Khan?
Yeah, it seems like every community's having this exact same conversation, and the points are all seem to be fairly uniform regarding schools and that type of thing. And where they vary is the backyard usage, where you can go and have a beer in your backyard, but should you be able to smoke a joint or whatever in your backyard? So when one person goes out on the deck and lights up, well, what about if there's a party and you've got 15 people in there and it's continuous all day, all night type thing. So there's, I guess, varying degrees, and so there's actually quite a few communities we're talking about in your house, not outside in the backyard. So it's becoming fairly, you can see a lot of restrictions being placed. But anyway, when these all over are having the exact same conversation, and I'm not sure whether the federal government and the provincial government know what they're doing yet. I think they're looking for ideas themselves.
Councillor.
So just on that, I know one of the staff recommendations is to kind of nip that, and that's the complaints and fines to be lodged against individual consuming cannabis in a manner that creates a nuisance. So to your neighbors. So not that I live beside you, Councillor McKay, but if they're throwing a party and there's 15 of my friends smoking up, it becomes a nuisance. There's that bylaw would be put in place where a fine can be issued. I mean, kind of serves it. I mean, I'm not saying inside's not better, but
Yeah.
I mean, Councillor Howe, I totally agree with you in regards to the alcohol thing. If it's black and white like that, it's definitely out there, and I think it's probably easier to police. But if it's throughout the whole community, it's either in your residence or your campsite or whatever permit or whatever you call it, campsite's like permanent residence. So I like that idea in regards to the alcohol, following the alcohol part of it.
Councillor Howe?
And again, it's our first crack at it too, and I think there's gonna be provincial regulations and federal stuff that's gonna come down that's gonna change all this anyways, and we may not be able to do any of that, but to get started so that staff can get going on it, that's the conversation that I think I'd like to have tonight, can that be a starting point for us and then move on from there? Is there any reason not to look at that? You know, I mean, I don't even understand how it's all gonna work with, like, there's edibles and oils and creams and whatever else stuff is going on, but I think it's mostly what we're talking about is actually smoking dope or whatever. That's the concern I think that everybody has around the table, right? Is that side of it, right? I don't know. It's definitely an oddball one, but I don't really have an issue with anybody smoking it in their backyard. And like Councillor McKay says, I mean, if 15 people are out the back and it's a noise complaint or something like that, different story. But to me, is it really any different than anybody, you know, burning leaves and stuff in their backyard? It's an unpleasant odor for the day while someone's doing it. I don't know. To me, I don't really have a huge issue with people doing it at home, and I'd rather them do it not inside their homes, kids in the houses and stuff like that. But I don't know. It's hard to say.
Councillor Scott, go ahead.
I was just looking at here, is there already something mandated for schools and playground areas, or is that something we need to be including here as well?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The province hasn't said what the rules are going to be, but they have said the rules will include prohibitions on places children frequent, including parks. With the state of legalization that's going to be happening this summer, there will be no legal sales of edibles, no legal sales of oils unless you have a medical license, as well as there will be no legal consumption establishments. There will be no smokers bars or anything of that manner.
That's in the first year, you said? Or
That's right now.
to get
What
kicked
could,
off?
what could change in the future, I don't know, but right now there's no edibles, no oils, and no consumption lounges.
So, sorry.
Yep.
So strictly what the legislation is talking about is just being able to smoke.
Yeah.
We have, Mr. Wall, perhaps you can help us with this, but we have, as you can see, council recommendation on the page as well, which covers quite a bit of ground as well. Now, in terms of moving the recommendation to accept it, the next process would be, that is not the final decision, am I correct, Mr. Wallace, with regards to this being a PNP as opposed to a regular meeting?
So council passed this in your last meeting.
Right.
This is here for discussion. So this is, what's on the page is what staff is going to be working on, and we've got our first meeting to start this tomorrow. So if
Okay.
council wants something different, then we are gonna need to know that in short order.
So that's the approach that we're taking now, that was decided by council. Further suggestions, Councillor Scott?
On the alternatives to the recommendation, number 4 said that we could add additional areas, including sidewalks. Should we include all community parks with playgrounds and the schools? Or would that be taking the bylaw too far? Would it fall, like, would the policing of those areas fall within the provincial regulation, so we wouldn't have to include them.
So again, it looks like the province is going to be regulating the use in parks. As far as sidewalks and the rest of the community goes, that's up to council. What do you want to have in your community?
Anything further on that topic? Councillor Howe?
Well, yeah, for what the recommendation is, I think the second part of the recommendation is the part that I'm hung up on. I don't think it should be limited to the downtown core, community center, skate park. All those should be included, but I think it should be set up similar to alcohol. That's what I would like staff to work on. And I don't know, when we talked about this at the meeting, we said we were gonna bring it to this so we could have this conversation, but to pass it, to get staff going on the other parts of it, that they could get started on, they would. And then at this point here, this is where we would gonna kind of try to narrow down on how it's gonna work. To me, I don't even fully understand it, but it's a bylaw, is it not? It has to be enforced by bylaw. It's not something that you call the RCMP and say somebody's, in by the high school. Well, maybe that is, but somebody's over by the bucket smoking pot. That's a bylaw at that point, not.
The RCMP have the ability and do on occasions enforce district bylaws. This would be one. I had the conversation with the sergeant last week about this. His thought was he didn't feel that making it consumption prohibited across the entire community would lead to a good result for the RCMP. My feeling from it was that if it's prohibited across the entire community, the RCMP simply won't enforce it. He felt that there should be areas in the community that you have the ability to do it, because when you prohibit it everywhere, then you're breaking the same rule no matter where you do it. Whereas rather, if there's areas that you can do it, when the RCMP interact with people, they can do education rather than enforcement and say, well, okay, you can't do it here, go here so you can. And that was his comments, is that he didn't feel a complete blanket prohibition would be effective if there was nowhere for people to go. So for one of the examples, and this has become an issue in cities that have moved forward with strict prohibition, most landlords will say you can't smoke in your house, and that'll extend to cannabis. So it could become legal if your community bans it in any public place and you live in an apartment, for example. It's now legal, but you don't have any ability to partake in it. Every time you want to use it, you're going to be breaking some law or some contract. And so that was his thoughts about having at least areas where it could be done legally.
Any further comments?
Yeah, well, to me, I would prefer that we set up specific areas where people that are in apartments that are not allowed to smoke cigarettes in there can go to. They can go inside the apartment and smoke a cigarette or whatever. And if we were going to say ban it from the whole, public area or whatever, I would prefer that we have areas set up rather than do it the opposite way and say, it's not that I say the whole town has to be banned. On your personal residence or your home, you can go in your backyard and do whatever you want there. Now, when we start talking about people that have apartments and they need a place to go to, perhaps that spot can be whatever, within 50 meters of your apartment, but no further than 10 meters from the door or whatever. But to me, I don't know, I just think it should be similar to alcohol. I don't think that, I don't know how long it takes when you smoke dope, you get high, but if they're allowed to go downtown or to the golf course and get high and then get in their car and drive home, now we've got another issue. If we didn't allow that to happen in the first place, if that was able to be enforced in the first place, then would you have that issue? I don't know. I mean, you're going to break the law regardless of, but the whole point is to try and lay out some bylaw that prevents the majority of it, right? I don't know. I mean, if nobody else on council feels that that's the way we should go, then I'll back down on it. But I'm not getting any flavor from anyone else that that we should be a little bit more than just a downtown core. I think that should be the entire town. I don't want people walking down the street getting high in front of my place when they can just do it in their backyard and do it in your own place. You can't walk down the road and drink beer. Why should you be able to walk down the road and smoke dope? I don't get it.
Councillor Scott?
Well, we do have included in that all walking paths, and to me we should include playground areas. I don't think kids or families should be subjected to that. But I think you know, we can go at following the alcohol laws, but you also have to consider the secondhand smoke and stuff like that. So that, like, to me, it's going to be tricky. And there are going to be provincial and federal legislation still coming at us. So like, this is a very early blueprint of what will probably have to be fine tuning.
Anything further, Helen? Where? Councillor Howe?
What's the definition on walking paths?
It would be the community, the definition here is the community walking paths, the major walking paths, not sidewalks or something like that. So if you want to prohibit it in those areas, you'll need to expand what the motion is here.
So the question becomes now, council, where do we go from here, if anyone? Further discussion, give it some more thought, bring it back again for further discussion, or is there anything specific you think we should be doing now to carry it to the next level? Maybe further discussions, whatever. Councillor Kukoka.
So just 2 points. Well, one, we've already given direction to staff from our previous meeting to work on this. And I was actually siding with Councillor Hall in regards to the liquor thing, but then hearing from Mr. Wall, and I did forget to ask that question when I was seeing people sitting here, but listening to that, and I kind of see that point. How do you, one, like he says, they can enforce our bylaws, and they have, or they haven't on occasion. But when he blanketed it all, now they're further, for sure they're going to be the bad guys, but they have no place to tell them where to go besides your house. Well, no, I don't have a house. I'm actually here staying at the hotel, and they won't let me do it in the parking lot. So it became legalized, and I have no place legally to smoke at Tumbler Ridge. So I kind of see where Mr. Wall says, where he had that conversation with the sergeant, and I see that. Now they can say, listen, I'm sorry, you can't be smoking here at the community center, parking lot there, but listen, you know, go down the block down there. Not that I'm trying to send them down Valley View, but now they have a place to kind of say to them where it is legal. You know, you can't do it on the path there while you're rollerblading, but, you know, go down on a sidewalk, or, you know, I think they have a place to point them. And where alcohol they can't, you're right. Alcohol you can't take a beer down, but I mean, I pretty much assume that I've never seen a police officer, whether RCP or Edmonton Police, stop somebody, check their backpack that's got a straw hanging in their mouth. Most people walking around with those anyways, right? So, I don't know.
Is there would there be some benefit in terms of contacting other communities to see whether or not what they are doing in the matter? Some of them may have already made decisions, the rest of it and so forth, had those conversations. Is there any merit in us trying to either identify, maybe providing, being able for us to get more input from those that have a successful plan, or whatever? Councillor Mackay.
I think there's a lot of that going on right now, and they're having the exact same conversation as we're having at this table. And it's, I don't see anybody that's really, and we, at Fort Nelson at the conference, that no one had any solutions really. Just like I say, their conversations just mirrored exactly what we're doing here.
Councillor Hull?
So on heavy industrial work sites, gas plants and stuff like that, they have designated smoking areas that you have to go to. You know, and I mean, perhaps that's a solution. I thought that, I didn't understand until you just said it there. I thought there was going to be like a dispensary in town, and you know, there was going to be areas that you go to that you just like a bar. You go and you buy it, you smoke it at this bar or whatever. I thought that's what was going to happen, right? But same thing when you buy a case of beer, you're staying at the hotel or whatever, you can drink it in the hotel. You can step outside of the hotel and smoke it, or step outside of your patio in an apartment and smoke it, but not 10 feet in front of the door where people come and going. To me, I think it can be worked in. We could find the solutions to those smaller points. To me, it's the one-offs that you're starting to talk about, people that are coming to town to accommodate them. I'm talking about accommodating the citizens that are here. And for the way I like it, I'd just try it the same as alcohol, and if we had to set up a few designated points where they were allowed to go to do that, then maybe that's the solution. I don't know what the solution is, but I'd like it more restrictive than what this is.
So how do we go about doing that? I mean, again, if there may be other communities, I'm not trying to believe it, but there may be other communities that are more advanced than we are relative to this particular topic. You might find their information useful. I mean, is there another way of doing that, Mr. Wall?
You're gonna find every option that you want to. You're gonna find communities that have prohibited recreational cannabis in public. You're gonna find communities that aren't prohibiting it other than what the province is doing. And you're gonna find probably a number of areas in between. So it's really, we can take a look at what other communities have done, but as far as an industry trend that's happening in municipalities, it's too early to tell. Everybody's grappling with this right now. Dawson Creek is just recently took this up. I haven't seen what their council decision was, but they were going to mirror the consumption bylaws were going to mirror their smoking bylaws. So as long as you weren't doing it on a certain number of meters in front of a door, that's where they were going to go. Like I mentioned, Calgary has prohibited it completely within the community in public areas. So it's really, what does council want for the community?
All right, Councillor Mackay, go ahead, sir.
And I would definitely lean towards kind of going along with the liquor laws regarding to public drinking, or and I guess I don't know how you would police the backyard thing. I mean, it's that's going to be something we have to grapple with, I'm sure, but definitely along the lines of public.
So what would be our next move, Council? What, to move the conversation further and to try to gain more ground in terms of reaching a conclusion and so forth? What, any suggestions how we're going to go about doing that? Is this a subject we table for now, bring up later on? Is there other, what's your pleasure?
I think this is the point. This is what a PEP meeting is for. This is the time to continue to talk about it and bang it around a bit more until we can come up with it. It's a small meeting tonight. Let's put some serious effort into it here. And once Councillor Mackay tends to think that it should be similar to the alcohol laws. That's what I think.
I'll do it. Yeah, I have no problem with that. I guess I just,
Councillor Scott? Yourself?
Sounds good?
Okay, so that's 5 of us. That's the majority of us thinks it should be more inclusive than what this is saying. So there's some issues with where do we let people that are in hotels and stuff do it that we got to work on. But do we set up designated smoking areas, or do we allow maybe the trend the hotel doesn't want to have that on their site at all? So it's up to them to have a designated site. If they want to, if these apartments want to allow somebody to have a designated site, we'll allow a designated site that's at least 10 meters from whatever it is, 3 meters from the front entrance or whatever. Allow them to make the decision. But at this point, they can't go out to the parking lot or whatever. I don't know. Does that make sense?
Councillor Mackay?
Yeah, well, a lot of it does to me. But I wonder if we could continue this. Not saying we just stop right now, but have the RCMP here present at a meeting, because there may be some concerns that they have that we're not taking into consideration.
Okay. Just stated that we have a gentleman here.
perfect. That's what I was just about to say. Can we bring him forward?
We do this.
He's right here.
Can you join us?
You
You're still
must
here.
know. You
Yeah,
must
he's still
know
here. I
this
mean,
is gonna come.
instead of doing another meeting, let's just see if we get permission to bring him up.
Exactly.
You look like you're giggling there. You must have some insight.
No, it's,
Welcome back.
Talking for it, and you're right behind.
yeah. Well, it's fairly accurate what Jordan said there. My big concern is I'm just kind of trying to look at all the avenues, right? We'll toe the line with whatever the community decides. So if the community decides complete prohibition, or people can do it wherever, we're still going to enforce the impaired driving and all that stuff. That's a separate issue that's separate from this, and that'll be something that we're still waiting to hear on how that's going to work out on our end. We haven't got any direction whatsoever from anyone on how we're going to be addressing any of our concerns. So I'm expecting that will be the week before the legislation comes into force, is we'll get all our direction then. So, but in regards to my concern with the complete prohibition is just that when we do have the people, it paints us as the bad guys if we're coming saying you absolutely cannot, and they're going, well, it's legal and I can do it everywhere when I'm at home and I can walk down the street. Well, here it's completely illegal everywhere and you can't do it, it's a bylaw. But if I can go up to somebody, I can say, hey, you can't smoke in town, but if you go down to this designated area, like I'm a bigger, my opinion is, for what it's worth, is I think having a few designated spots is the best way, because then we can point people in that direction. If they're smoking downtown, and they're from out of town, we can say, hey, you can't smoke in Tumble Ridge, but these are the 3 places you can smoke. Go to one of those places, we won't bother you. You smoke in town again, we're going to give you a ticket. And it's very easy to uphold that ticket too if it goes to court. Like if the person gets the ticket and they dispute it, it's very easy when they've been given warnings and they have options. It becomes much more difficult to hold it in force when there's no options available and they're not given warnings. So that's kind of what my comment was there on the enforcement part. But we're definitely have an interest as well, because we all have young families and we don't want to be walking down the street smelling marijuana everywhere and having, going to the park and having 15 people sitting there smoking marijuana. Like I'm on board with that too. So we're definitely interested in supporting to make it as clean as possible in the community. Because again, I know it's probably the nightmare scenario that isn't going to happen, but you don't want to be walking everywhere and you go downtown and you're walking 3 blocks to get some groceries and there's 15 different people walking in front of you smoking marijuana. So
So Sean, make another comment, then Councilor Mackay.
Yeah, so just so we get clear the air here, I mean, I don't think anyone's talking complete prohibition. I don't think that's ever on the table here. We're all saying at your own private residence and stuff. Just so that we clear the air on that is not complete prohibition. We're talking your Tumblr trade. We're talking at your residence. How we go about figuring out the places that, like a rental unit, and they won't allow you to smoke at that, so that guy has to now go somewhere. He's allowed to smoke in the backyard. I don't think you can restrict him from smoking in the backyard of a rental house or apartment or whatever. Perhaps there's an opportunity here for somebody to make some money on it and have those places like, I don't know, like a Subway or something says, within 10 meters of our building, there's this booth that we have set up and you can go here, right? But to me, I think that's the solution that we're looking for, some designated areas. My only concern with designated areas though, is that does that become a petri dish or a breeding ground for criminal activity?
Councilor Mackay.
I would just like your opinion on, and I may be totally off base with the backyard thing, with a party taking place, but do you see that as being difficult to enforce?
if it's solely smoking, I see that as being a very difficult thing to enforce, because even with noise, the challenge that we face is we pretty much have to catch them committing, because if we don't, how can I speak to the severity of it? So if I go up to the house and we get a report of that and it's really, really, really bad, and it's to the point that it reaches, say, a criminal threshold of mischief, which is pretty high bar, but let's say it does, then I can proceed criminally. If it reaches even a bylaw level, you have to be able to prove that it reached that level, and it's a challenge when you don't witness it yourself. Noise is a bit easier because it goes on for a long period of time. The reality of when it comes to marijuana consumption is by the time we get the call and it's dispatched to us, it's probably done, right? By the time somebody gives us a phone call, dials in, the 5 minutes it takes to give the information and for us to get there, they're done. So it's very hard for us to witness that, but at the same time, people are willing to give us statements, and that's how the bylaw is written. We'll definitely work with Enzo and bylaws towards enforcing that.
Thanks.
Any further discussion, Councilor? Councilor Scott, go ahead.
Could we turn this back to staff to see where some designated smoking areas could be defined? Because I do think it's a recommendation that having options to point people and give them warnings is a really good deterrent to not create, like, if we go straight prohibition, there's going to be issues. This here does give that option of steering people where we want it to take place.
I'd need a little bit more direction. Where do you want it to take place? Is it there's certain residential areas that this is going to happen in? Are we putting people into the woods before they can smoke it? What are we talking about here?
So more detail relative to those locations, that will give us what it is that we.
And we'd probably only
We wanna
need one
see-
or two, like Tumbler Ridge is small, we'd only need, a couple of areas. But I want to steer clear of any of the playgrounds, like I don't, if the kids are down, in the evening, there's a lot of secluded, like, playgrounds, I don't want, the
So.
groups
have we-
congregating in those areas.
So have we not identified some criteria of, such as what you've mentioned, Councillor Scott, not close to schools, not here, not there, so on and so forth? Do we have a list, or have we made those, identified those parameters that we want to look at, that we could maybe give staff a further idea relative to what might be appropriate around the community? Councillor?
My understanding from Mr. Wall, that's all provincial. Provincial's gonna have that out there, schools, parks, playgrounds.
The what I would need direction, what I do need, if council's going down, we're gonna have pockets of where you can consume. What I need to know is a residential area going to be included in that pocket? Because now if you exclude residential areas, you exclude the downtown core, you exclude the commercial park where people are going to be, you exclude the walking paths. We've now, the areas that we are allowing it is pretty much outside of the town center, right? It's pushing it out there. So I just need a little bit more idea of where we're going with these smoking areas.
Councillor Hall?
So my
Councillor
my
Scott.
thought is on your own personal property, just like beer, right? You can drink a beer and run the lawnmower around, so you can smoke a joint and run the lawnmower around if you want. For a property, you can do what you want on it. Problem comes in if I don't want somebody smoking dope on my property, I don't want it, right? They shouldn't be allowed to come to my property and smoke dope there. I don't want it happening there. I don't want people sitting in front of houses waiting to catch the bus smoking dope while kids are walking by to go to school in the morning. I don't want that happening. In residential areas, the only place you can do it is your own house. And that's the parameters I see for residential areas. For apartments, maybe the solution is the parking lot. You know, maybe you can go to the parking lot of apartments or hotels, or if the hotels and they allow you to do that. But the downtown core, completely off limits. So if you want to go watch a hockey game and smoke a joint, go over to the parking lot at the hotel, because they allow you to do that over there. But you can't go outside the rec center and smoke dope. I mean, maybe that's a kind of an all-encompassing solution that we could utilize. And that seems a little easier to enforce than, you know, you have to go to that booth that's over there by the Visitor Information Center by the Canada flag. You know, you just say, no, it's any parking lot that is attached to a hotel, provided they allow you to do that there. And the RCMP will know, yeah, that establishment allows you to smoke over there, so you can go over there. Maybe that's the solution, I don't know.
Councillor Pat?
And that would be the apartment owners or the establishments putting their specifications or allowances on. I was just going to throw it back to our RCMP member. Do you have some areas or ideas of those designated areas?
I do not know.
Okay.
It's just, I know with alcohol, you can go to bars and stuff like
Yeah.
that, but that's not going to be an option. And yeah, even in apartments, people drink alcohol in there.
Mhm.
And alcohol is responsible for probably 70% of our
Yes.
work.
Oh,
but
absolutely.
it's still legal in those regards. So whatever the rules are, we'll enforce them. We'll rely on that. So.
Okay.
A question is, and I don't know anything about this, but is cannabis a drug, obviously? Is it addictive relative to the fact that that will lead to drugs, heroin, whatever, cocaine, whatever? Are we concerned about that, or should we be, when talking about cannabis? Because one of the reasons I'm asking, don't know what the difference, I get the feeling sometimes, I don't see much difference between a cigarette and cannabis. And why the same rules wouldn't apply. Why we have to do anything special about cannabis. You shouldn't have that when you're driving. You can smoke when you're driving. I'm just trying to get a feel for it, or the cannabis and how we distribute it, control it, and so forth. What are the differences, and why does it have to be different in terms of the rules and regulations?
I'm not a drug expert, but I can speak in the regards that the difference between cigarettes and cannabis is cannabis impairs you, whereas cigarettes do not. If you're a non-smoker and you have a cigarette, you might get a high for 30 seconds or a minute or whatever it is, but that's the extent of it, whereas marijuana, even if you use it on a regular basis, gets you high. the marijuana, that's the reason why you can't use a vehicle while under the influence of marijuana, but cigarettes aren't an issue. My bigger concern is for the marijuana is it can affect people around you more than cigarettes. Cigarettes, secondhand smoke, it's not good for you, but it doesn't get you high, whereas marijuana can. So secondhand smoke, like the hot boxing, people put themselves in a small room, smoke marijuana, everybody else around gets them high too. So that's the concern with marijuana around other people, is if I'm smoking marijuana here, other people are breathing it in, they're getting some of that high, whereas cigarettes, you're basically just getting the cancer causing part of it. In regards to
Which is not a good thing either.
no, but it's apples and oranges in some way, right? In regards to it being a gateway drug towards other drug use, I'm not an expert, but from what I've heard, I think there's conflicting stories or conflicting studies both ways. With the majority of the ones that I've been privy to are leaning more towards no. The people that are going to go down the hard drug route, they're going to go down that route regardless. And it's. But again, I'm not a drug expert in that regard.
Councillor McCann and Councillor.
Do you see any problems with if the downtown core was banned? It was banned in downtown core, but someone had using it for medical purposes, whether it was anxiety, pain control, glaucoma, whatever. Is that enforceable?
If it's the bylaw, then it would still be enforceable, because even people with a license to consume marijuana, like a medical license, still can't go to a park and smoke it. They still have to do it in their residence, and they still have to, like, it's pretty defined on their license, and it's usually in a residence or someplace that allows that. They can't just go to a park or walk downtown. We've got several calls about that with people and several along their way. So
I believe with this, when they bring it in, the province will regulate where medical users can't use it. The district bylaw will, from my understanding, will not apply to that. So the province will say you can't use it in buildings, you can't use it in parks, you can't use it. But if somebody with a medical need for it, our bylaws wouldn't apply to them.
Sorry?
So my understanding, and the rules still need to come out, but from what I was reading is that the province will set areas where medical cannabis cannot be consumed, but we will not have the ability to regulate medical cannabis consumption. So our bylaws will not apply to medical cannabis consumption users.
So they'll sorry. People in the bylaw in the states, so your residents, like you're saying, with apartment complex says, oh yeah, you guys can use that corner. Those people that have medical can still smoke downtown.
That's correct.
But they can't at this time.
But can't today, right?
today, no, they can't. It usually says it right on their license.
So will that,
But
No,
again,
that's gonna
each
change?
license is different, right?
It'll be
The
individual.
licenses are issued to the person themselves.
yeah,
And again, it's hard to say because it's one of those things we've got zero direction on to this point. And as the licenses are issued, if a doctor, like you could even get a license for alcohol, for example. If a doctor gives you a prescription for alcohol, if you have medical alcohol, you can drink alcohol in public. But you still can't go to a school and be drinking it at a school or drinking it in a car and doing that stuff. So there's still rules, but those are usually defined within the license that the person gets. And that's whenever we stop somebody with a license, they actually have the license and they produce it, and it says they're written almost like a court document, right? Like it says this, and it gives the stuff for that. So it's hard to speak in generalities for it.
thank you.
To Helen and Rob.
Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry, and Will.
Okay,
Right.
so I like the idea of restricting it right now to own personal property, like what Councillor Howe was stating. I would be comfortable with that. And then with the medicinal marijuana, like there wouldn't be somebody that would be allowed to smoke it. Say if you had anxiety or something and you needed that, I would hope that it wouldn't allow them into a rec center, at the arena or something like that.
You still wouldn't be able to smoke it indoors.
Perfect, okay.
So the other portion of it
Yeah.
where, I think it needs to be, at home and whatever is this opiate crisis that they touch on and talk about. Now, I don't know how much truth there is to this though as well, but I've heard reports that that marijuana can be laced with opioids and you can get this fentanyl or carafentanil and almost die. Lots of people are dying from it, from smoking dope as well. Now, obviously, the stuff that's going to come from the Canadian government's likely not going to have that, but that's still not going to stop the criminal side that's going to lace this stuff with these drugs. And do we want somebody in, you know, the downtown parking lot smoking one that's laced with opioids and passing out down there and dying? Like, to me, I don't want that down there. That's going to happen. Try to, you know, those people want to take that chance with that type of product, then you do it in your own home. And you know, not everybody in town needs to see that type of stuff. I don't want to see that type of stuff. My kids shouldn't have to see that type of stuff. So that's, to me, that's, you know, the type of stuff that we need to talk about.
Anybody else? So where do we go from here? We've had a good conversation on it. A lot of points have been brought up and so forth. Put this on our next P&P in terms of trying to move a step forward. Bring it up to regular council meeting. What's your pleasure?
I think a motion needs to be made. I'm not sure if Councillor Houseman's written down that. The only question I have before you do a motion, Councillor House, when we stayed about hotels or apartments, we're blocking that all up. It'll be up to that residence. Are we gonna go to are we gonna say, oh, every apartment complex can designate a smoking area,
That's how
cannabis smoking area?
you can't tell them what they can do with their private property. You
Right.
can tell them you have the ability to do this.
Ability. So that would have to be in the bylaw that they have the ability, including our hotel accommodations.
That's correct.
Okay, just wanted to, one point, come back here. Correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Wall, we don't make motions here in terms of moving and second, as I recall, but we take a step back. We can make a motion here that's going to be presented on our next council meeting of where it's ratified as opposed to here. Am I correct on that?
That's correct.
I just wanted to point that out there.
Just on, I thought that was only money. If we're spending money, we're not spending money. We're just giving direction to staff.
There shouldn't. There's a difference between what should be done and what council has done. You shouldn't make any decisions at a committee meeting. Any decision at a committee meeting should be forwarded to the regular council meeting. That's not how this council's practiced, though.
No, I agree with you. So just on that, because I just noticed, the reason I asked that is because you guys are saying how you're working on this tomorrow.
Yeah.
Right, so you guys are gonna be working on this, not on this, if it's voted in tonight, to move to the next regular meeting. In regards to the other way, you guys are gonna start working on this. We're gonna make a motion to move this to maybe as the liquor law states, and, you know, hotels and apartments may select a spot for cannabis smoking. You're gonna be working on this while we're waiting for this motion to come forward to pass, and then you'll have to redo it. Is that my understanding?
The report wouldn't be brought to you at the next meeting. If council passes a motion tonight, it can be put on the agenda for the 22nd. Staff is flexible enough to work on both ideas at the same time, and understanding if council's voting tonight 5-0 on something, we're probably not going to invest a ton of time into building it with the downtown core prohibited. So there's, you know what I'm saying, there's
Yeah.
the letter of the law, how it
Yeah,
works,
no,
but
that's
we
fine.
also live in a real world and we understand so we can adjust.
The only other thought I want to throw out there as well is I wasn't thinking with regards that we're going to solve all the problems here in the one meeting that we're having tonight. But we may want to have another P&P and carry on round two, or whatever it happens to be. But in terms of, I can't recall us ever having made a motion here, making a motion here, and that being the way it's going to be without taking it to council for formal ratification. So that's the only reason I brought that up. So, I mean, and I'm not trying to limit the conversation here, but do you think that another similar P&P or another meeting to talk about the same subject may be warranted, might be worth our while? Go ahead, Rob, and then Will.
I think just to save staff any unnecessary work, I think there's some things that we have a consensus on tonight that, as Mr. Wall pointed out, they don't have to investigate. And maybe that's what we should be determining first, and just what we do have a consensus on, and then conversation, following conversation.
All right? can't see any reason why we can't do that, but go ahead, Mr. Hunt.
Same thing I was gonna say, they're looking for direction, we're giving them direction,
That's what I'm
right?
trying
So
to-
that's all we're trying to do here.
Councillor Scott.
And following the alcohol recommendation, like Councillor Howell and Mackay are stating, I want to make sure that we consider the hazard of the secondhand smoke as well with the cannabis. I don't want my children and grandchildren seeing or being around the smoke. So then that's where allowing it on own personal property outside or whatever is at owner's discretions. But yeah, I don't want to be passing somebody on the sidewalk and inhaling the secondhand smoke.
Councillor Howell.
And again, this is our first crack at this thing. I mean, we're gonna put this bylaw in and it's gonna change, I'm sure, as the federal government, British government puts things in, it's gonna change over and over again. One concern I would have, if we were to go for the parking lot idea, is, would that then, for instance, the apartments across from the fire hall or whatever, would that be, okay, that's an okay place to smoke pot, would that bring everybody from the downtown core to their parking lot to smoke there? Because that was an okay area. You know, it should be for those residents, right? For those residents. Now, if the trend looks at it as a business opportunity and says, you know what, you can come, anybody can come from downtown core because they've given us this right to put it in my area, and you can smoke it in our parking lot and then come in and grab a hoagie sandwich or whatever you need there. You know, that's the part that we need to make sure that if it's a residential and not a business area like an apartment, you can't go from the downtown core to the apartments. I don't think that should be right.
Should just have to reside there,
You have to reside there.
right? That's what I thought you hit for.
Yeah.
No, I'm good.
Okay, Daryl, go ahead.
Already did.
I don't believe you have the power to do that, council.
To do what?
To say certain people can use it in certain areas and certain people can't use it in the same area. I don't believe you have the power to do that.
It's
So
not our
like,
land though.
What's that?
It's not our land.
Well, that's correct, but you're saying you're going to make a rule telling, you're gonna make a bylaw saying this, this resident can smoke it here, and this resident can smoke it here, and this resident can smoke it here. I don't believe you have the power to do that.
but that's their residence. I'm saying if that apartment is your residence, you can smoke it in the parking lot of that apartment building.
Yeah, I don't believe you have the power to do that.
I'm allowed to smoke it in the backyard of my residence that I own. People own these apartment buildings,
That's right.
but you know,
But
there are those within the apartment buildings that are renters that can't.
So on the same token, if you're gonna smoke it in your backyard and you invite your neighbor over to smoke it in your backyard, now we're going to fine your neighbor because he's not consuming it in his property. That's the same idea of what you're talking about.
No, not quite.
Have
Not
people,
quite. It's the same thing if I invite you to come over and have a beer with me as I'm doing the grass. But Joy decides she's gonna have a party in my front yard and I don't want her there. Right?
that's not what it is, because you're talking about an apartment where, let's say somebody's visiting that, or somebody just walks out. What you're saying is that we are going to the district. This is different than private property. You get to choose on your private property who does what on your private property. You ask them to leave. But what you're talking about, what council's talking about now, is now going into private property and telling that private property who is able to do different things on that private property. So we don't have any bylaws that differentiate. If you're at your home and there's other people at your home, it's the homeowner that we deal with, right? Or if it goes to the RCMP, it's the RCMP that deal with it. But creating separate rights for separate citizens on the same parcel of land is not something that we, I do not believe the municipality has that power.
Okay, we have Helen and then Dale.
I was just, that would fall under the owner of the apartment dwelling. They would set up, you know, what their rules and regulations would be. And then it would be up to them to enforce it. If everyone from the downtown core started going there and it was a problem, they would then be
That's
able
right.
to.
They could make
Yes,
the rules. We
exactly,
can't.
exactly. And you were saying that we could stipulate the bylaw to say that the apartment or a business owner could regulate where they want people designated to smoke it.
We wouldn't have to do any of that, including, we would just say, if council wants to do it, you just say on your private property, and the departments have their own private property there,
Exactly.
they can make their own rules. We wouldn't need to get into that at all.
Okay, perfect. And so I think if we're saying allowing it on own personal property, I think that covers the apartments. It covers what the Trend or whatever business would allow on their property. It kind of leaves that for them and takes it out of our hands.
Okay, Derek?
So more or less same thing, I was gonna say, it'd be up to the strata. We're saying resident, your own property, so the apartments are owned individually rented out, but it's a strata. So that strata owns that property through all their ownership. They'll make up, we're saying in your own resident, now, most apartments aren't gonna allow cannabis smoking. Most stratas probably won't allow it in the building. So maybe they'll decide to say, when a vote happens, just like it would happen here, that they're gonna put the corner of the parking lot. That'll be up to them. I can't say that, Jordan, you can go smoke it there, but I can't. That's their property, so that they'll mandate that. And then they'll police it themselves. So Jordan and I go over there, we're not welcome at one of the they'll kick us off, and if we don't leave, obviously, bylaw would come in or the RCMP. Same as a part of your house. If I show up at your house, you kick me out, and if I don't leave,
Fair enough, so that's what stops just the random Joe Blows from showing up, because that's the closest parking lot
sure,
to the.
that won't be up for us to put in our bylaw. That'll be up for them to police it themselves. So if it's known that I can go over to the Trend and smoke, I don't know, when you first pull in closest to Chevron, and maybe that's their policy if you're staying at their hotel or if you're using their facility.
Yeah.
And I come over from the store and go over there, and they know that I'm not staying, they can kick me off. If I don't want to leave, now it's obviously I'll be dealing with the member at the end. It would be up to them.
Well, right, just along the same lines, I mean, anything that we write on that, just followed up by at the discretion of the owner or owners, which would cover strata, I guess, but I mean, that just pretty well, I guess that takes care of the issue of who makes those decisions.
Because I mean,
Okay.
if you own, sorry.
No, go ahead.
If you own the apartment and you want to smoke it within your own apartment, you're allowed to do that. You can do that. But then that smoke then goes into the guy's apartment above it. I don't know how the strata works for cigarette smoking, but I assume that you're allowed to smoke cigarettes in your own apartment or whatever. But in most of the strata, I don't know how that works. I mean, that's up for them to have to figure that out. But on the same token, they say, well, you got to go out on the patio. Well, now somebody goes out on the patio and it's again different from cigarette smoking. The smoke's going upstairs to the kids that are playing on the patio above, and that person above is ticked off with it. The strata then has to deal with that. And the strata says, go to the parking lot. Where does that leave us though for the random dude coming into town, or you live up on Wolverine and you want to have a dart or whatever? Where do they go? Do we have an area?
But my comments were made to, basically for designated areas, the back end corner or something like that, or in your apartment, it's not you the owner.
Okay, well, we've had a good discussion, lots of ideas, lots of conversation, comments made and so forth. Don't know that this is the only discussion that we're going to have on it, but to try to take it to the next level, what is required by us now? Give some thought to the comments that have been made, and what our feelings and positions will be. Bring it back at the next P&P to have another similar discussion. What's your pleasure? Mr. Mackay?
I think so, but I've listed, I got about 5 different topics that were discussed that seem to be in agreement, and if we have that, then maybe that's things that we can scratch off, and one of them is the playground areas, anywhere with children, which the feds or the province is probably gonna take care of anyway. Downtown core, I think that was agreed on. And also to establish designated areas around town.
Okay.
And backyards at again, at the discretion of the homeowner. And again, with the apartment blocks and hotels, same thing.
That's 4. You have the 5th one, Guy?
Yeah, the backyards that the homeowners, but also the other one was actually the hotels and, and apartments.
Right. Anybody else in terms of what you got out of that relative to topics that we can refine maybe at the next meeting or whatever?
The only thing I'm struggling with is the recreational use. Somebody's wants to, I don't know, they're down watching a hockey game is a good example, and they between periods want to go out and smoke a joint. do they then have to go to their home? Because if they go to their home, they can't drive back down. Now you're impaired. Or are you able to walk to the apartment? Or are you able to walk to the, you know, is the Trend Hotel able to say, we'll allow anybody in town to do that here? Are they allowed to do that? Could we make the bylaw that you could allow it in your parking lot for anyone to do that? Like, could that happen? Because it's almost an opportunity to get more clientele or more people, or if you look at it.
Council could regulate it so that it can only take place on private property. And then what people want to do with that private property is up to them. Now, it's going to be further restricted by the province. You've got to be a certain amount of feet away from doors and entrances and stuff like that. So you're probably not going to have, if you make that rule, there's probably very little risk to the downtown core having any space where it could be consumed in the downtown core, because your shops don't own the parking lots in the downtown core for the most part, and the areas that do are within the entrances. So you're probably okay with that. There may be one small exception, but that might be an area to go. But I think it's something that council you want to think about. When you prohibit, you have to take a look at the scale of the problem, which we don't know what it is yet, right? But if you prohibit the diffuse consumption, like where it's going to take place a little bit up here for 5 minutes and a little bit over here for 5 minutes and a little bit over here for 5 minutes, and you ban it in all of those areas, and you say we don't want any of it taking place over here, you take what would have been a diffuse problem and you funnel it into one area. And that's what you're talking about, and what you may have the risk of creating, is that instead of having it really diffuse where it's not going to bother anybody, now it's been funneled into 1, 2, or 3 areas that could create problems. And the other problem, as you said, is if you put those areas to consume too far away, people might start making that calculation. You hope they make the right calculation, that I'd rather get hit with a bylaw infraction for smoking it somewhere I'm not supposed to than driving home, smoking it at my house, and going back and getting hit with a impaired infraction, because the impaired infraction is going to be much worse than the bylaw infraction. But what decision people make, who knows?
Okay, we've got a couple of other items on the agenda as well, but Council, where would you like to see us go as our next step? Good conversation, covered a lot of ground. Put it on the next PMP to carry on with the discussion, or what's your appetite? Go ahead.
When's our next PNP? When's our next PNP? September?
July.
July? Then it's not one in June, so.
Not really enough time to do that. Put it to another PMP.
Want to set up kind of another meeting? Talk about this specific subject. Doesn't have to be at the next PMP. I just want to set a date, see if everybody's available for it. So, they see them.
Is
No.
there,
Sorry, go ahead.
is there something happening on June 18th? I've got this here calendar that doesn't have a council meeting scheduled?
The meeting on June 4th is going to have to get pushed to either the 11th or the 18th.
Okay.
I don't know.
But I was just thinking if we did
availability is.
push this particular topic to June, that might give, people time to come up with some more ideas.
I mean,
It's gonna be the same thing.
I think staff has a pretty good idea where we're coming with it. I think we've discussed the things that we're all in agreement on. It seems like a 5-0 vote on that here, but it's the portion we're trying to figure out of how we decide. I think we figured out on the hotels and the apartments and have a pretty good feeling of what we would try to get going. The last part that we don't quite have a grasp on is just somebody who's not from here, or somebody that just wants to occasionally walk out from an establishment and go somewhere to some area. And to me, I think the way forward on that is to allow some of these businesses that, if they want to allow that on their property, as an opportunity to, maybe there's some way you can make some money off of that, I don't know. You allow the hotels to then say, yeah, this hotel or this gas station or whatever, we're gonna allow it on our property, but nowhere in the downtown core. I don't think outside the hair salon They should be able to say, yeah, we're gonna have it right here. I don't want it in the downtown core. The kids gotta walk through there on the way to school. Over on that side, you don't. You know, to me, maybe that's the solution, that anybody that wants to have that occasional one, or guy driving through town, they can be directed to that. Yeah, you can go to that hotel, they allow it in their parking lot, and that one doesn't. I mean, I don't know how that would work, but that's kind of what I would be looking for from staff. You know, I think we've given them enough stuff to get going on. I don't know how you guys feel about it, but kind of explore that idea. Is that enough to?
Put it in a motion, we'll forward it to the next regular meeting.
Well, the first, on the recommendation that you have, the first one, the updates to the businesses and all that, that seems good to me. The second one that we're all hung up on, 3 and 4, to me are fine. I don't know how you guys feel on them, but that's what I see. So all that part of the, all
So-
that part of the recommendation makes sense to me, except the second part, where you're actually going to allow it to happen.
So that would be, I think we all agreed to own personal property, so that would be the establishments deciding what they want. We can't make that stipulation for them. The only way we could pick designated areas would be if it was something of our own, like some spot. That would be the only way the town could designate an area, is to pick a place removed from, like, the downtown core. Like, we could pick across from Tags or something where there aren't any kids, away from the walking path. And I think those designated areas, or we could leave it as is with the personal, like, designating it only to personal properties, see what some of the businesses do, and
Then change it.
then change it.
If there's none of the businesses
Yeah.
allowing it.
Yeah. I'm just thinking of things like Grizzfest, or, you know, when there's a function there, they're probably going to have to designate an area, because I think there's nothing worse than non-smokers, you know, standing, enjoying an activity like that, and then having, you know, the person light up a cigarette or a joint right beside you. So those kind of things are where you get into problems as well.
I think about like the golf course, the RV lots, flatbed
Yeah.
campground, you know,
I
places
think,
like that
I
within
think
the
most,
district.
yeah, businesses are going to have to designate a smoking area. It'll be handled, and that's where I think we should follow the smoking legislation as well. Like, you can't smoke in company vehicles anymore. That's, you know, WCB has made rulings like that. So to me, there's people that don't want to smell that secondhand smoke of whatever it is. So having designated areas where people choose, like, if they go in that area, they're going to be at risk of the odors or whatever. But I think if we start with just legislating designated areas to own personal property, see what happens with apartment complexes. Would a notification go out to those as the bylaw is issued? And then see what they come up with, see if there are any areas.
Any further comments? Mr. McKay?
Just wondered, Sir Vale, if you wouldn't mind giving comments on growing your own. Is that something that's like I'm not talking like a ball diamond, just a couple plants, or where's the law now?
Well, law now is you can't have any, unless you have a medical license to grow. I don't know what the new legislation, I think the new legislation will allow for people to have a small amount to grow, like a couple plants or something like that, but
Or
without seeing the new legislation, it's very hard to speak
Yeah.
on that.
If you want to hit the bad guys in the pocketbook, I think that's where you do it.
you'll be allowed to grow 4 plants within your own home,
Yeah.
as long as they're not visible to the public.
Yeah, because one of the concerns with growing marijuana is the damage that it does to properties too. So that's why typically it's done at rentals, not at places people actually own, because it causes, basically can wreck a whole house through the mold, and moisture, and all the other stuff. That's why it's done in rentals. So.
Council, yeah, go ahead. Brad.
So you keep pushing us here, Mike, to get this going here, I understand, but there's a lot of portions of it here that we gotta keep talking about. To me, it should be not in a residential area. That would be a portion of the motion, not in residential area,
For,
anywhere. You're not allowed to smoke it within the residential area unless it's your personal property. So you can't walk down the road, you can't go down the path within the, you know, the residential area. Maybe that's an option for, you can go to a commercial park. I don't know. You can't smoke it in the downtown core. You can at businesses if they allow it, like the hotels if they allow it, and the apartments if they allow it, and you can go to the commercial park. I don't know, but the commercial park, is there any issues with having it out there?
depends if they're walking or driving.
I got no issue with the residential part, area, walking around, I don't think that should be allowed either, so maybe that's something else that we have a good consensus on.
So can we just, we'll write those notes down and try to fire it together and do a motion? So not in residential area, we're all in agreement with that, but within your personal yard or whatever.
So why wouldn't you just mark it as private property, your own property? Say you can't smoke in residential area, you say your own personal property. Pretty much saying you can't smoke in, if you're not, you can't smoke in the residential. No, you can't smoke in residential property.
Well, I don't want to all encompass of the district of Tumbler Ridge. You can't smoke it anywhere in the district of Tumbler Ridge because that includes like vast amounts of forest. That's what I'm trying to get away from.
Okay,
Is
see what
to
you're
say
going, okay?
within a segment of the community, the residential area, you're not allowed to accept in your private residence or whatever. To try to define where you can and where you cannot.
By okay, in a residential area, you're still not prohibiting anybody from walking down the street, and that's the goal of your.
That's right.
Yeah.
But if you want to leave your residence and go into the woods, you're still within the district of Tumbler Ridge. But to me, I don't have an issue with that, right? You know, if you're walking along the back highway or something, I don't have an issue with that. If you're out by the ball diamonds, I don't have an issue with that. You know, if you're out going to the dump, I don't have an issue with that. You know, down to the golf course. Maybe people do though, I don't know.
Any other comments? Yeah, Daryl?
I'd like to keep hearing Councillor Howes here, he started it.
So, and if we were gonna talk about like commercial areas or heavy industrial park or places like that, you know, for consumption, you know, to me, is there an issue with that out there besides you have to drive to get to those places? That, you know, I don't know.
Then you gotta
I'm
drive back.
grasping at straws here. I'm throwing
No
stuff
problem.
out to try to get some conversation going
No
on.
problem, my thing is you have to drive back.
Yeah, that's right. That's so.
Now you're under the influence,
Yeah.
putting things at risk.
Well, we could continue to just add to this list of where we do not want it, and then see if any issues occur.
So yeah, okay. So not in
So just-
residential area unless you're in your personal residence. You know, and we all can agree nothing in the downtown core. What encompasses the downtown core? Northgate, Southgate, Pioneer Loop, downtown core. Do we include
Well,
tags?
It
apartment
has here
buildings?
community center, skate park, city center parking lot, so that pretty much is the downtown core. It's all defined here.
Okay.
That
Tennis
would be only
court,
town-owned part of the city center park, I would think.
Hmm?
That would be only the town side owned, right?
Sorry, no, that would be the downtown core, and then we can exclude it in the downtown core completely. You just change the smoking bylaws to say you can't have it by a certain amount of meters from your business, and we can eliminate any business's opportunity to provide that.
and we already have the walking paths in here, so playgrounds, it sounds like that'll be taken care of under provincial, so that's fine. And then we could just add residential, like no residential areas unless it's your own personal property.
Right.
And I think that pretty much encompasses what we were looking for.
Mr. McCarthy?
There's one last question for me there. Just this, any prospective business person who's looking at this could approach, council and request a zoning amendment request. Amendment to the zoning. Okay, Mr. Wall, would you mind just explaining that a little more? I mean, if we wanted to take a little section out of the, like maybe over by the cold beer and wine store, somewhere back there, and zone that would be appropriate for this type of venue. Is that what you're?
So the zoning is talking about retail sales. Now, you have the ability to prohibit it in the public areas you want to prohibit it and allow it in the public areas where you want to allow it. Again, under the regulations of what the province said. So if you want to down it or prohibit it in the downtown core, you can. Other than this area over here, there's no issue with that. Now, let's say you do that to, I'm just thinking, if you do that to a private business and say you're not allowed to smoke it anywhere in the downtown core except we're not going to prohibit you from smoking it in the Tumbler Ridge Inn parking lot. Tumbler Ridge Inn parking lot says, no, we don't want it here. And now they have people going to smoke it there because we keep telling them we prohibit it everywhere but here. They might not be very happy that we're continuing to send people over to their property to do something they don't want
I don't think we would ever do that, Jordan. That's, I don't get what you're saying there. Like, how do, like if they didn't want it there, obviously we would set it up that that's their private residence, or their private property. They don't want it there, so it's not allowed there. You know, we would never go to the RCMP and say we've allowed it there, but they don't allow it there.
I'm just answering the question. If we picked an area where it could happen, then that's what I'm saying. It could even be off. It could be we pick the area down at the end of the street past the cold beer and wine store. While the cold beer and wine store, Tumbler Ridge Inn and Tags may not be very happy that we're sending everybody to smoke marijuana right at the end of their businesses. That's what I'm saying.
Councilor McKay, go ahead.
And again, that cul-de-sac there, back there, you're right, you may have business owners that might not be a little offended at that. But is there, maybe we could explore areas in town that are pretty kind of similar to that? We could throw some grass down, a little bit of and maybe some benches and things like that, and if somebody maybe that could be a designated area, it's close to downtown, but still kind of out of sight, out of mind. Is that something that could be explored by staff, just in suitable areas for that?
Yes, that's something we can do. So we just need to, it looked like council had closely come to an agreement on adding residential into this, where it's banned in the downtown core, banned on the walking path, banned in residential. So now are you saying that's all agreed on? I'm just trying to get an idea. You're saying that's all agreed on except for we may want to carve out exceptions in the downtown core?
I thought it was, and within your own residence or your own backyard, it's up to the owner.
Yeah.
But walking down the street in a residential area would be banned.
That's correct, yeah. So just to me, it looks like the council's agreed on all of that, and now what you're talking about is do you want to carve out exceptions in the downtown core?
To allow it or not?
To allow it.
To allow
That,
it.
I thought that's what you were talking about, is whether or not you wanted to create those areas.
That's what I was looking, requesting maybe staff to look into, and just see where a suitable area that wouldn't be offensive to another business.
Yeah, if that's the direction council gives, we'll do that, yes.
Councilor Scott.
See, I think we should start with this bylaw, with the added residential, unless it's your own personal property, and see what other mandates come from the provincial and federal government. We'll have this in place, and then it's going to need tweaked. I think we've got a really good grasp, and then we can bring the detachment in again and see if there are issues arising. And then see if there's a designated, because, you know, each of the, and then maybe put this on a town hall meeting as well. See what the businesses, like there will be something going out to them. See if anybody does designate an area, because that'll solve some of our problems if there are designated areas. So I think if we start with this, rather than trying to make it too complicated, and just see where it goes from there.
Yeah.
Comments?
So we would allow businesses then?
Well,
To
the businesses will determine whether they're going to have a smoking area, like a designated smoking area.
So, but what about businesses that are in the downtown core? What about Subway? What about the hair salon?
Well, no, because it
They are
would
not
be,
allowed.
no, it would be prohibited.
Businesses outside of the downtown core, like the Shell station or the Tags or the Fast Gas or whatever, outside of downtown core, they'd be allowed?
Well, we could, like, that would be up to their discretion, I guess.
Yeah, up to their discretion,
Yes.
for sure.
Yes,
But is
because that is their private property.
Yeah. Okay. Take that as the first crack at it, and
I
then,
don't know.
is that enough, Jordan? Do you got a kind of a grasp on what we're thinking about there, or what?
So it looks like you're talking about the areas that are included in the recommendation plus residential areas. That's what council's come to an agreement on, I believe.
No smoking in residential areas unless it's in your personal residence.
Yeah, so I would just pass a motion to forward that to the next council agenda. If that's where you guys are.
And as for the apartments and hotels, that's up to that's a private residence, that's up to their strata to decide where they want it
That's
on
correct.
their property.
That's correct.
And that could be included in it as well.
It's their private property.
But
Yeah,
that's in the motion. though,
that's
I would
correct.
say.
Yeah.
And the downtown core is out, and we'll figure the rest of it out after. Anything that's outside the downtown core.
Yeah.
Should we put a motion on the floor?
Yes, please.
Mr. Howe?
Well,
I don't have a word in it. I don't know.
you just need, all the stuff you're talking about, you just need to add residential. We don't regulate what people do on their private property anyway, so just add residential and we're good to go.
So what would the motion be?
That council directs staff to include the prohibition of residential areas in marijuana consumption bylaws.
Mover and seconder?
That-
Seconded by Eric. Discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Okay, council, we're now down, if I'm not mistaken, to
Thank you.
continuing funding of the Thunder Ridge Museum Foundation. Anybody want to take a break, 5-minute break before going into this, or what should we do? Carry on? Doesn't matter to me.
I just wonder if this should be moved to the next PMP since the mayor brought this forward. Pretty sure he wants to be here for discussion on that.
We can do that as well, sir.
The mayor, just so council's aware, I brought that up to the mayor that he wouldn't be here. He wanted this to come so that council could discuss it and give him feedback. But it's up to you guys if you don't want to discuss it.
To me, it'd be good to have the feedback when he's here to hear his feedback too. He brought it forward.
Yeah, I think that's my preference. From where I'm coming from, joint discussion, the rest of it, so forth. Hear what he's got to say. That's what I'm interested in. What's your pleasure, council? Bill?
Yeah, so just to throw the comment out, I mean, I have no problem with this going to a referendum if that's what, the discussion is on it, but I too obviously like to hear from Don as well, but if that's what we're heading towards.
Councilor McKay?
Wonder if Mr. Wall could give us a insight to Councilor Mayor McPherson's comments. Not insight, but maybe just can you run that past us again? Because he had some pretty legitimate concerns and.
About it being on the agenda? He just wanted to
his
get council's
views.
feedback. I wouldn't want to speak for the mayor on this
Oh,
issue.
Yeah, that's.
Yeah.
No?
Is that not what we're talking about here? Is a referendum at next election?
That's
That's what
correct.
this is built around, right?
That's correct. Now, I just want to make council aware that referendums and assent votings are legal terms that carry very specific instances. This is not, while you may want to refer to it in public and everybody will understand it as a referendum,
Yeah.
please understand that legally this is not a referendum.
What is it called then?
This is just a public opinion question. And the wording, the word for referendums now is assent voting. Assent voting and referendums are very similar. But this is not either of those. This is basically council seeking public opinion. A referendum has to be a yes or no question. It has to be very specifically defined about what the service or question is going to be. And at that point, those can become in certain instances legally binding on the next council on whether or not they can move forward. This would not be legally binding on the next council.
So how do we get the opinion of the public then? What's the idea behind this? Like,
This question would be to get the opinion of the public on
and
it.
like, is this Mayor McPherson's idea to circulate this to the public, like to?
This would be done during the election.
So again, I'd like to hear what Donna said. I mean, why wouldn't we be going to a referendum if we wanted to be a yes or no? That's my question to him,
I guess
right?
that's his side of it, right?
Yeah, I mean, like, so really and truly, we get people's opinion, but it does not have to be followed, or a referendum is followed. Is my understanding?
I don't think you can get this into an area where you're going to, where it's going to be a legally binding thing, because let's say you did it, should the district provide $150,000 to the museum, whatever number you want to put, even if you get that legally binding, minus a cent, minus $1, plus $1. It's very, very difficult, and in very rare cases where you actually get that type of a cent voting. And even when you do, it's really hard to, next to impossible to tie the hands of the next council to do what they want.
There's no reason, correct me if I'm wrong, there's no reason why we can't wait until Mr. McPherson is here to hear his views, the rest of the soul and so forth, since
That's
he's basically sponsoring that. My suggestion is we allow that to happen. Okay. Is that all right?
Yep.
Yeah.
All right.
Question and an answer.
Question and answer. Any questions? Yes, sir.
In regards to the marijuana bylaw, the government released, best practices, business practices about, where smoking should be allowed, and they definitely cited speakeasy rooms, cannabis tasting rooms as a suitable place that these should be done. But it sounds like you don't want the site of smoking marijuana in public. Now, what if somebody was able to put up forth a business proposal that met those requirements in the downtown core and marijuana smoke would not be released? Would that be a good idea to build into the bylaw?
Go ahead, Joe.
Consumption lounges are not going to be legal. So you can't start a business and say, well, come here and you can consume cannabis. You won't be able to do that.
Anything further?
So how can you designate areas within a community? Doesn't that become an outside lounge?
No. Just a short answer, no.
No, nobody really knows that.
I just want clarity on my next steps for my presentation, does it then go to council for their?
Yeah, I'll work with you on bringing the proposal to council and they can make a decision.
Anything further, council?
Just on, one kind of two questions?
Make it quick.
Yeah, a few problems. Just a very good conversation. I think you guys are on the right track with this cannabis stuff. And one suggestion I might want to make is, what if everybody in the private properties, you talked about people in hotels, what if all those hotels said, no, we don't want it? You still got a problem that the officer brought up, that we need someplace to go. So a suggestion would be one place that's the community, the town owns, would be something to look into, one area, I don't know where it would be. That would be maybe an idea to think about. Because you could have the department say, no, we don't want it here, and the hotel say, no, we don't want it there, now you've got nowhere to go. Not that I want to do anything, but anyway, just something to work on, just another option.
Councillor Mackay and then Councillor Howe.
Just to answer that, I think we did give direction to staff to explore for those areas. Just,
Okay.
yeah.
I can hear that.
And it is really a moving target, right? Like we're gonna kind of take a stab at it and see how it goes, and then I'm sure there's gonna be stuff that's gonna come in that's gonna say, yeah, you guys couldn't do any of that stuff anyways, and it's out, right? But the place may end up being the Bob Marley interpretive pond trail that you guys are funding over there. So.
Smoking in the forest.
I would,
Isn't there?
recommendations move
Then
to
the bylaw
adjourn.
then.
Council, we move to adjourn. Sarah, thank you. Helen, thank you. All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you, folks.